This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
You think you know a lot, and in this day and age, you think, how could I not know something had happened that is horrific as I'm getting ready to describe? But many of you may not have. And I was talking to someone who said, well, I don't ever remember hearing anything being taught like that in any school, and nor in college. See, this is where I am very, very insistent that we remember our history, the good and the bad. You put up markers identifying what is. Don't tear things down. Put up something with it that puts it in context of where we are now or what's changed since then. That's why I'm so opposed to ripping down Confederate war memorials and statues. And now, as I pointed out the other day, the woke crowd going after Abraham Lincoln, Abraham, the great emancipator, because in his second inaugural address, just weeks before he was killed, he talked about we need to basically honor all those who have suffered for us in our wars. And he was talking about not only the Civil War at the time, but everything that happened, just the founding of this nation. But he referred to his widow and his children. And the woke culture says that's sexist. We need to strike those, even though they're emblazoned on the headquarters of the Veterans Administration building in D.C. and at hospitals across the nation. You wipe it out, you don't really get context or anything going forward. They had at one time the Greenwood District of Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was considered by many, had a reputation even, being called the Black Wall Street of America. Now, I don't know if they actually identified it, quote, with those words at that time, but it was a thriving area where black businessmen and women had set up shop, and it was exceptional. And it was a harbor for African Americans in that highly segregated city, Tulsa, Oklahoma. So a lot of them lived there, but it basically became a place of commerce that was beneficial for the owners of the businesses and the community as a whole. And by that community, I mean the black community around that area, the Greenwood area. President Biden is going to be at the Greenwood Cultural Center in Tulsa. He's going to meet with survivors of what happened in 1921. That's right, supposedly survivors from 100 years ago. at least 300 blacks were killed when white mobs ran through the Greenwood district, shooting, destroying, setting fires. It is the worst racial massacre in U.S. history. Make no mistake about that. They say in a matter of hours, 35 square blocks, 35 blocks of that vibrant black community became ashes. And the death count, some say many more than 300, but that seems to be the base number. 1,000 homes and businesses looted, set on fire, belonging, of course, to black residents of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm looking at a piece written by Young Lee, written for CNBC, saying how Black Wall Street was shattered 100 years ago and how the Tulsa race massacre was covered up and then unearthed. And the thing I want to point out in her article was, for the longest time, the massacre received scant mentions in newspapers, textbooks, and civil and government conversations. And that's true. She adds it wasn't until 2000 that the slaughter was included in the Oklahoma public school curriculum. 2000. It did not enter American history textbooks until recent years. In 97, they formed the 1921 Tulsa Race Riot Commission, and maybe some folks began to get some information about that. But a professor for Afro-American and African Studies, University of Michigan, said that massacre was actively covered up in the white community in Tulsa for nearly half a century. And he said, when I started my research in the 70s for his book called The Groundbreaking about the massacre, when I started my research in the 70s, The official National Guard reports and other documents all missing. Tulsa's 2 daily white newspapers went out of their way for decades not to mention this. Researchers who would try to do work on this as late as the 70s had their lives threatened, their careers threatened. Their lives and careers threatened. Now, that's his statement. I have no reason to doubt it. I imagine it's right on point. What started all of this? Well, it is, for anyone who has read or seen the movie To Kill a Mockingbird, it kind of gives you a preface of what happened. They refer to a young man identified. It's told in different ways. So I'll go with one description, and this one is written by CNBC. And I think it's also taken from the book of the author I was just quoting. It started with a black man, 19-year-old Dick Rowland, who was shining shoes, accused of assaulting a 17-year-old white elevator operator in a nearby building. 17 years of age, now 19. I don't have and see a lot of context as to what evidence existed other than the fact that he was accused. I haven't found valid information saying that she clearly identified him or just said a black man or if it happened at all. But this part of the town, founded by many descendants of slaves, had the reputation as a Black Wall Street of America, had many African Americans in this same city, and based on the story that came out of a 19-year-old guy by the name of Dick Rowland, a man, I should say, assaulted this 17-year-old white girl, a white mob went into Greenwood, turned it upside down, and police were not just complicit, they were active in it. Sarah Page died in 1950. And some of the reports I've read about the complaint that she was making and how it happened, to this day, I don't know if it did or didn't happen based on what I've been able to see, but the bottom line is it gave, in their mind, it gave the police, white, obviously, and the majority of Tulsa residents, white, reason to attack the entire community. There are stories of men, women, and children running from burning buildings, trying to get away, and they're either shot down or they're grabbed and beaten to death. When the report originally was made, Tulsa police had arrested Rowland based on the charge itself. But then there were reports that the sheriff and his men had to barricade the top floor to protect Rowland because white men wanted to come get him, and the sheriff was, at that time, trying to do the job. So that all started on May 31, and then on the early morning hours of June 1, Greenwood was looted and burned. The governor did declare martial law. National Guard troops were sent in. They helped firemen in putting out the fires. They took African Americans out of the hands of the vigilantes. And they imprisoned all black Tulsans who were not already being held. Some 6,000 held the convention on the fairgrounds for up to 8 days. And it lasted about 24 hours. When it was over, at least 800 injured, deaths ranging from 55 to 300 plus. The Race Riot Commission looking at details and determine, quote, the things I just told you in large part, their statement. These are not myths, not rumors, not speculations, not questioned. They are the historical record. A shameful record for our nation. President Biden is in Tulsa, Oklahoma, going to use this event to talk about policies to combat racial inequality. I just hope it's taken that way in the sense that it really unifies. I don't know where it's going to go from here, but if you didn't know about this, now you do, and you should know about it. Pray that we continue to move farther from such attitudes and violence, mob action. Well, coming up in the next segment, I'm going to turn the corner entirely for you. The UFO apparently confirmed, several UFOs confirmed by the Pentagon. I've got details. Stand by.
You can follow Larry on Larry Connors USA Facebook. Larry Connors USA Facebook.